What's the worst thing a guy or girl said to you on a date? Write in the comments what you think about it. What's the worst thing your significant other has ever said to you? Enjoy the show. Story 1. TLDR. I'm a theater geek, and bi. He told me theater people who enjoy theater are dumb and that gay people are terrible. He went on a rant talking about how if all the gays in the world died, it would be a better place. Full story. When I was younger, I was really into Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was on the local cast and did shows and events multiple times a month. Rocky is a big thing with the LGBTQ+ community. My dating profile had pictures of me in costume and clearly stated I was interested in men and women. Anyway, I was trying my hand at online dating and met up with a guy who I'd been texting a couple days. Right off the bat, he is awkward, but one is. However, I got a weird vibe off the bat. Anyway, we were chatting and he makes a comment on how stupid theater is and how dumb the theater kids in his school were. Before I could really say much, he continues on about gay people, how awful they are, and how they should all die. They are useless to society and destroying families, etc. It was unhinged. I texted my boss to call me in for an emergency since I worked at the mall. While I was waiting for her, I asked him if he had even read my profile. He stared at me and said, "Yeah, why?" I then asked him if he knew what bisexual means. He got super flustered and tried to backtrack, saying he didn't mean people like me. Boss calls. I fake an "I need to come in right away for an emergency." I also casually drop our store code word that the police may need to be called. Luckily they didn't, and I was able to leave without issue. Crazy dude had the nerve to ask when we would be seeing each other again. Story 2. In high school, a girlfriend and I went to the movies on a date. We weren't sure what we were going to watch until we got there. She picked Saving Private Ryan, which surprised me. The worst thing she said to me on the date was nothing. After that very intense movie was over and we were walking back to the car, I started to ask her what she thought about the movie, expecting to have a conversation about it. She shut me down right away, saying she wanted to absorb it or something along those lines. So we drove in silence. I expected her to start the conversation on the 25-minute ride home when she was ready. Apparently she wasn't. We drove the entire way in silence. We arrived at her house. I looked at her and said, "Thanks for the date." She said thanks to me as well, got out of the car and went inside. I don't think we ever talked about the movie after that, even though we were in the same friend group for years afterward. It was awkward, and I was disappointed because she was a very smart gal, and I hoped to have a meaningful conversation with her. Story 3. I travel a lot for work, matched with a girl on an app, did the whole video chat thing for a day or two, and agreed to go on a date while I was in town. Date went well. Towards the end of it, she says, "It's too bad you don't live here. I'd totally leave my boyfriend for you." And that's when I learned she constantly and consistently cheated on her boyfriend. I told her that I don't get into relationships with cheaters, so there's nothing to worry about. She spent the next half hour insisting that she'd never cheat on me specifically, making every excuse in the book of why it's okay that she was cheating on her current guy, and trying to pull all the mental gymnastics possible. Story 4. Toward the end of the night, she said that she was concerned with what appeared to her to be a lack of motivation on my part, I guess. She was concerned that I was underemployed, which was probably true, but I was also relatively happy at the time. I didn't need to make a fortune. I could have taken the opportunity to regale her with all her faults, but took the high road, so to speak. I think we maybe had one more date before she quit talking to me for whatever reason. I was happy to let it go. Story 5 had a first date with a guy last week. We were sitting on a bench by the lake. He asked to make out. Me, kinda nervous as this was my first date in my 3 years being single, blushed and was like, "With those people sitting next to us?" There was another bench maybe 3 meters away with 2 old men sitting together. To which he said, "Oh, those sand and asterisk, 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 asterisk? Fuck them." To which I was jaw-dropped. I was like, what the fuck, do not ever say that. The date then ended, but he kept texting me after that, so I called him out for his disgusting behavior, to which he simply replied, "Ha ha," and then okay, and proceeded to block my number and all my socials immediately after. Thank fuck that's over with, but man, I am never using apps again, and yes, he was white. Story 6. Within 10 minutes of the first date. Have you heard about the massive complex of intricate tunnels underneath our city that are used to transport children to the rich and powerful? Let me educate you about them. And when I jokingly said the reason I don't believe her is probably because the COVID vaccine put a chip in my brain, she responded very seriously with, "No, the microchip is in your blood." The date didn't last very long after that. Story 7. Oh gods, this was years ago now. But I drove us to the riverside to hang out and eat a nice lunch, where she proceeded to tell me about how all of her medical issues, a huge scar running up her arm, detached optical nerve and some other stuff, was from when she was shooting up heroin and waxed poetically about how much she misses doing heroin, and that she was too good for me because I wouldn't just give her money. I mostly just sat there speechless and finished eating, at which point I took her back to her parents' house, and she asked me when she could see me again. Story 8. For our grade 5 graduation, our school took us to lunch at a local restaurant, and we got an early viewing of the first live-action Scooby-Doo movie. We were going back to the school and we were sitting in the seat in front of a couple of friends who were also dating. I'll fully admit that they were the better-looking couple, and I'm by no means a handsome fellow personally, especially at this age. This comes into play here shortly. So as 10 and 11-year-olds are prone to do, the friends behind us were dared to kiss. So they did. And of course, it was our turn, because we were dared the same as revenge, I guess. We were talking afterwards, still on the bus, and I forget what exactly prompted my girlfriend's response, but it was, "So I had to kiss you, Blazanar." Obviously, she used my real name as Reddit wasn't a thing in the early 2000s, in the most disgusted tone I've ever heard a person speak. I don't think we were together much longer than that. Story 9. I got 2. The first one was definitely the worst one. It was a date my friend set up with her friend. One of his first questions to me was my opinion on getting choked. No, what's your favorite food or hobby? Nah, just do you like getting choked? The second was a normal date with a guy who I felt a connection with. We had talked for a while before the date and had a lot in common. All is going well until he mentions to me that he may or may not have a child with his recent ex, but hasn't done a paternity test yet. That was a deal breaker for me, so I told him that it would be best not to continue then. He blew up immediately into a rant about women. Story 10. First date, we were talking about values and gender roles between romps in her bed. She then revealed that as a man, I should be expected to fight other men for saying disrespectful things to me, or I'll just be the kind of man who gets walked all over. I paused for a long time, mortified, and then said something like, "If I let people like you pressure me into assaulting people over status and pissing matches, then I would be the kind of man who gets walked all over," as I put on my pants and got the fuck out of there. She did apologize and follow me to the door, asking me to stay, and I walked it back a little like, "I ike you, but that killed the mood for me a bit. Let me cool off and I'll text you later," or something, but like, nah. Total values mismatch, red flag. Only time I've ever walked out of a date. Story 11. Before getting to what he said, he picked me up and I was a bit surprised by what he was wearing. We went to a sports bar and I was not dressed to the nines, but at least I looked nice. This dude wore a tank top, shorts, flip-flops, and a backwards hat. The guy was actively texting his ex while on the date. He wanted to make sure she was okay. The relationship was long distance, and she was 10 years younger than him. I think he was 29 or 30, making her 19 or 20. I wanted to get out of there so quickly that I just paid the whole check. I didn't even let him drive me back. I took an Uber. Later, he and I argued over text about how it was beyond inappropriate to text an ex while on a date, and he said his ex was the love of his life. I wasn't even surprised he said that, but I did say I wanted him to pay me back since I paid for both our meals at the restaurant. He said, "Okay, I'll come by tomorrow. Don't touch my truck." I was blocked by the morning. Story 12, LOL, not even something she said. She simply just smiled and it gave me the ick. I had a face of disgust after that when I see her smile. She is so skinny and like, bro, her presence is just not wanted anywhere, but she still slides like she's just sitting there quietly with the obvious intent to just abuse our substances, so nobody passes off to her. She's a fucking mutt, she can hang herself, and nobody would really give a fuck. Story 13, not a date. Went to the cinema with a lass for her birthday. She invited me, my cousin, and a couple of her friends, one of whom my cousin liked. She spent the entire time flirting with me, cuddling up, sitting on my lap. She was hinting at going back to her place after the movie. Turns out she was drunk and was trying to make my cousin jealous. I left once I found out. My cousin followed. She messaged him later that night trying to get him to go over. Story 14. Matched on Hinge with this woman who runs a local meetup I've been planning to attend. I didn't recognize her picture from the site when we matched, but she mentioned she recognized me. We have some nice conversation online and then we make plans for a drink. She shows up and for 30 minutes doesn't smile or laugh once, not even when she introduced herself. I tried prompting conversation with every tidbit I knew about her and nothing stuck. After 10 minutes, I was so freaked out I went to the bathroom just to compose myself. Luckily, she excused herself after 30 minutes. Never been so relieved in my life. I look back over her profile and she has this huge smile in her pics and says she feels most alive when laughing with friends until her sides hurt. Anyways, I still want to go to the meetup, so I couldn't just disappear. Sent her a nice text saying I didn't sense a connection, but thanks for coming out and maybe I'll see you at the meetup. She sent a friendly text back with more emotion than anything she said in person. I don't generally get too worked up over first online dates, but this one threw me for a few days. I'm wildly curious what she's like in a different social setting. Story 15. Can you even have sex? Was said to me after I had a hard time breathing while on a walk where he was walking faster than me and I was trying to keep up with my short-ass legs. I also have asthma and was looking for my inhaler at the time, and it was like 90 degrees Fahrenheit that day with humidity, which is essentially breathing underwater for an asthmatic when they're already struggling. Mind you, I knew I was going to have a through time because of all of this, and asked if we could change our plans beforehand. He didn't want to. Story 16. Me and this guy I met on Tinder once went to a pizza place on our first date for dinner. One of his first questions to me was if I wanted to come back to his place after, and I told him I'd think about it more or less. During the date, I walked to the restroom and I stumbled upon a friend of mine who works there as a waitress and talked a bit, then went on to my business. When I get back to my seat, he asks me again if I wanted to go back to his place, and I tell him it's late and I needed to get up early the next day and perhaps another time. He then got very frustrated and upset. I forget his exact words, but he said something about how he's paying for the bill and getting nothing in return. But after that, he turned and pointed to my friend and asked if she was single. It felt good replying back, "No, actually her boyfriend is right there." I pointed to another waiter, which so happened to be her BF at the time. I forget his response to that, but the night ended up with him paying for the check, and he had the audacity to ask for a ride home. I took him home anyways, just kind of felt bad for him in a way. Story 17. Not what she said, but what I said. We were on a date in the city and walking around while it was really cold outside. We sat down somewhere to take some rest and just chat up, and it became quite awkward. Both felt the spark, but were too afraid to take a step. So her step was telling me she was cold, so I would come in and put my arm over her. Well, what did I do? I just said I was cold too and just sat there being all awkward, not even moving an inch towards her, just arms down, chilling without saying a word, being cold as FK. Apparently it worked because we've been together for 8.5 years and engaged now, but well, it was one of the most awkward things I've ever done, I think. Story 18. Not a date, but we were out together with my couple friend and one of their friends. Their friend tells her friend in their language something, and she turns to me, and while laughing at my face tells me her friend thinks I'm cute and funny as if it's a joke. Of course, her boyfriend was stunned at first, as was I and her friend. Then she realized her mistake and we barely talked afterwards. They had a huge fight and she apologized to me in the end, but it was rude as fuck. Story 19. I've matched on Tinder with a lady from my uni back in year 2016, but different course and area. So we set a date, and we went to a cafeteria at uni. And after talking for a while, she told me that I remember her ex-boyfriend, and she wanted to go with me to an ice cream shop that they both liked a lot, and she started talking what she liked in bed that he did to her. I've never talked to her ever again. Story 20. Met on dating site. Drive a bit to meet up with her. As we walk to the restaurant, she runs into a dude she knows and chats him up. No introduction or anything as I stand there awkwardly. Not a huge deal, we only just met in person. She closes out conversation with dude saying, "Let's hook up later after I'm done with this." I am pretty noped out at this point, but figure I drove all this way, and I am hungry. She then turns to me with a big smile on her face after dude is a bit away and says, "Whew, I have been trying to get with him for a while." Dinner was whatever. I get a text from her a while, days, later asking why she hadn't heard from me. I thought we hit it off. Bless her heart. Story 21. I cooked dinner. Spaghetti carbonara. She proceeded to talk to her friend during their dinner about their upcoming court date. After the dinner, she proceeded to down a bottle of vodka. She passed out 40 minutes later, so I carried her to the bedroom, put her in bed, filled a glass with water, and let her sleep. Called a mate and we went out partying. Came back 05 in the morning. She woke up and asked where I had been, told her I was in the room next door. She then asked if we could start drinking again, which I answered no to. She then said that she saw I had a bottle of whiskey downstairs, but I just said that she should not be drinking anymore. We argued for 30 minutes, and then went to bed. We fell asleep, and I drove her home the next morning. She said we should meet again, and that I was the nicest guy she had met. Blocked her on all social media, and continued to live my life. Story 22. So I, F19, and him, M22, Went to a nice restaurant for our first date, and I wore my nicest and favorite outfit, a nice pair of jeans and a black turtleneck top. We went out to a bar after for a few drinks to chat more, and he turned around and asked, "Can I have your wish list, darling?" I had asked how come, and what he said led to me not asking for a second date. He told me my clothes were horrible, and he didn't want to be seen around someone who wears items of clothing like that. So he wanted to buy me new clothes, and offered that he even just picked them out himself, as he saw other girls looking down on me for my outfit choice. These girls were my friends who smiled and said hello before going back to their own conversations and did not once look down on me. But according to a few, that not asking for a second date due to a comment around my clothes was horrible, as the rest of the date before that went well. Story 23. He spoiled the death of one my fav anime characters. I was reading the manga, but stopped BC, I got busy, so I just waited for the anime. He asked me if I had read the manga past the first season of the anime, and I said, yeah, quite a bit, but haven't in some time. He said, "Did you reach where X died?" My heart sank. I thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. I gave him 15 more minutes to be respectful and left. Also, he was QA engineer and I'm a ML engineer. He kept talking about how my job is boring and his is interesting, which is insanity if you ask me. But yeah, the whole time he was annoying. Nothing hurt more than the spoiler, though. I didn't finish watching the anime or read the manga anymore. What a shame. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.